confession to make. I've strayed from my list when it comes to transition pictures. The list is so long. If it were a line outside a pizza store waiting to buy pizza, it would go down the block, round the next block, and up the next block. I mean, it's really, really long. There are so many people like Nelson Mandela and Amy Winehouse and Bob Marley that I still haven't got to. But just occasionally, somebody will suggest one, and my mind will wander, and I'll think, oh, I wonder what happened to him. Oh, wow! And they're so interesting that I want to tell you. Why keep it to myself? And this happened with a Mexican artist called Frida Kahlo. She was really a great painter. She did surreal stuff and folk arty kind of stuff. It's very appealing to the eye. But as interesting as her work was, her personal life is 50 times more interesting. It was so turgid and tumultuous. She died when she was 47, very, very young, of a pulmonary embolism brought on by a drug overdose. She committed suicide, basically. But her life from the very beginning was filled with drama and trauma. She had polio as a child, for instance. She was sexually abused as a school child. Then at 18, she was involved in a bus crash which left her very, very seriously injured and impaled by a rod of metal. This also damaged her back. Then she had a miscarriage. Then she had an appendectomy. Then she had 2 abortions. Then she had gangrene and had to have 2 toes amputated. She married, but her husband cheated on her with her sister. So in return, she cheated on her husband with Soviet leader Leon Trotsky. Then Trotsky was assassinated and Frida Kahlo was implicated in his murder. Then she got a divorce. Then she got a fungal infection in her hand. She became an alcoholic. She had several lesbian affairs and caught syphilis. She suffered from depression. She attempted suicide. She joined the Mexican Communist Party. She had her leg amputated. She got pneumonia. Then in 1954, when it all became too much and she was in too much pain and on crutches and in a wheelchair, she simply could not carry on and she took an overdose and killed herself. But that's the kind of life she led. So when I went into the pictures, I was intrigued about what would happen with somebody whose life had been this tumultuous. When I found her, it was a complete contrast. She was just floating down. It was really pleasant. She felt whole. For the first time she could ever remember, she felt unencumbered, without pain, because, of course, all the things that go along with being mortal vanish when you go from form to formless. And when she stood up, she didn't just walk around this symbolic cave. She went like a ballerina on tiptoe. In living memory for her, there had been not a day without discomfort or pain or inconvenience or something that went with being mortal. As she danced around the place, she felt the joy of release, that sense of lightness, and she rolled up the tunnel like a dandelion blowball. You know the top of a dandelion when it blows off? It was like that, just floating freely. And there was the light that they always go into. But before she went into it, what came to me was the question, why could I not feel like this back there? Why could I not feel free and without pain in my mortal life? Why did I have to suffer? And the answer that came was, you didn't have to suffer. You could have felt like that at any time. You chose not to. Now that's easily said to somebody who is in dire pain. These are just words when you're in dire pain. But I think what it meant was that her life got progressively harder because she focused so much on external things. On people, on marriages, on sex, on objects, on travel, on all the things that are stimuli to the senses, but don't do much for the spirit. She came from a very religious family. But of course, that's not nurturing necessarily to the spirit. It's just a set of rules and principles. But she could have felt like this at any time, but she chose to direct her energies outwards. And when the outward energy no longer brought satisfaction, she simply ended it and killed herself. And Spirit said, you could have had this at any time, but in fact life was made worse consistently and comprehensively as she went along, because it was trying to teach her to stop looking outwards in order to satisfy her hunger, her needs, her longings, whatever. Look inwards. That's where the answers lie. That's where wholeness lies. That's where happiness and contentment lie. She wrote down before she died that she never wanted to go round again. She just wanted a joyful transition. Let that be the end of it. And indeed, she got her joyful transition. It went exactly according to plan. But she would have to go round again. This was not an old soul. This was somebody who had a lifetime of pain to teach her one valuable lesson. That wholeness comes from the inside, not from satisfying your senses on the outside. And that's what I learned from Frida Kahlo.